Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Democracies of the World, our show on Sansad TV where we take you through the latest happenings from parliaments across the globe. In today's edition, we'll talk about the big developments happening in Middle Eastern countries. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll also take you through the parliamentary structure of Israel and discuss in details about the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill passed by UK government. I'm your host Bhawna Nayar. Let's start the program with Israel political crisis. Israel has moved closer towards its fifth election in less than 4 years, plunging it deeper into political uncertainty. The country is currently grappling with rising living costs amid renewed international efforts to revive a nuclear deal with Iran. While Naftali Bennett has announced that he will not run in upcoming elections, Netanyahu has called the developments great news for millions of Israeli citizens and vowed to return to office as Prime Minister. Take a look at this report.
Just a year into his job, Naftali Bennett is out and the country of Israel is once again going to the polls, the fifth election in 3 years. Foreign Minister Yair Lapid is set to head a caretaker government ahead of polls due in late October or early November. The move came after attempts to stabilize the coalition had been exhausted. Meanwhile, Naftali Bennett has announced that he will not run again for the Knesset in the next election. On Sunday, Bennett chaired his last cabinet meeting as the Prime Minister. At the meeting, he listed a series of accomplishments under his government and thanked ministers. Bennett and his main coalition partner, Yair Lapid, decided to dissolve parliament after the shaky coalition lost its majority 2 months ago. Prime Minister Naftali Bennett formed his government a year ago with the aim of halting the never-ending cycle of elections. But the fragile coalition government, which includes parties from across the political spectrum, lost its majority earlier this year and has faced rebellions by different lawmakers in recent weeks. Analysts say that the collapse of another government is bad news for stability in the country.
Israel is about to experience a fifth election campaign within 4 years. This is bad news for stability. This is bad news for Israel's ability to manage the ongoing affairs of state. It's a reflection of the weaknesses of our electoral system that needs to be fixed and in order to restore stability and to ensure a decisive outcome of election campaigns.
Former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has promised that his own alliance of right-wingers will win the upcoming vote, but polls show that he may also struggle to rally a parliamentary majority.
Mr. Netanyahu today is quite strong in the polls, but in any of the polls he never reached the 61 seats out of 120 that are necessary for him and his allies to return back to power. So I would say at this point it's a 50-50.
The elections, the fifth the country has held in 3 years, deepen an unprecedented political crisis in Israel. Israel's 4 previous elections between 2019 and 2021 were basically referendums on whether Netanyahu could rule while facing trial on serious corruption charges. Netanyahu, who was indicted in November 2019, has denied the allegations. The fragmented nature of Israel's political system, with parties based on social identities, has ensured that no party had ever achieved a majority on its own. Bureau Report, Sansad TV.
Israel does not have a written constitution, and according to its basic laws, elections to parliament are held every 4 years unless the Knesset decides by an ordinary majority to dissolve and trigger early elections. The country is a democratic republic with a parliamentary system of government headed by a prime minister and involving numerous political parties representing a wide range of political positions. Unlike in India, Israeli voters vote for parties, not for specific candidates. The Knesset is the unicameral legislature of Israel and comprises of legislative branch, the executive branch and the judicial branch. Let's take a look at how Israel parliament works.
The Knesset sits at the very center of the Israeli politics. It is Israel's parliament and it makes up the legislative branch of the government. The major function of the Knesset is to legislate laws and revise them as necessary. Additional duties include establishing a government, taking policy decisions, reviewing government activities, and electing the president of the state. The Speaker of the Knesset acts as the controlling authority inside the walls. There are 120 seats in the Knesset, and to form the government, a party needs at least 61. Its 120 members are elected every 4 years under a system that provides for proportional representation for even quite small political parties. All Israeli citizens aged 18 and older are eligible to vote. Voters choose among national lists of candidates offered by political parties and groups. If a party's list, for example, receives 5% of the vote, the first 6 persons, 5% of 120 on that list, become members of the Knesset. However, no party has ever won a majority on its own, and ruling alliances comprising 8 to 12 parties have been the norm. The most important seat is that of the Prime Minister, but he depends entirely on the support of the remaining Knesset members. After the members of the Knesset have been elected, Israel's president chooses the candidate he believes has the best chance of forming a coalition. The candidate, often the leader of the largest party, is given 28 days with the possible extension of a fortnight to form the government. Israelis do not vote for a particular politician, but for a political party, and the leader of that party has a chance to become the next prime minister. Even the most successful party will not bring in enough votes to win a majority of the Knesset seats. In fact, because there are several competitive parties, the most popular party may win no more than 25 seats, less than a quarter of the Knesset. Each political party meets with the president the day after the election and suggests whom they favor for prime minister. The president then invites the favored person to build a coalition government. The party that wins the most seats in the election isn't necessarily guaranteed to have the next prime minister. It depends entirely on the politician's ability to make the right deals to build a coalition. Technically, 61 seats are enough for a majority in the Knesset, but prime ministers generally want at least 65 or 66 seats. That gives them a bigger majority and a more secure administration, allowing them to push through any political resistance in the Knesset. Oftentimes in Israeli politics, one or two of the smaller parties hold a tremendous amount of influence. These parties decide who gets to make a coalition government and who becomes prime minister. Bureau Report, Sansad TV.
Meanwhile, Kuwait's crown prince on Wednesday dissolved parliament and called for an early election amid escalating disputes between the Legislative Assembly and cabinet. The move came as 21 opposition MPs staged an open-ended sit-in at the parliament complex over the delaying of legislative sessions and the failure to form a government. The cabinet, the fourth to be formed in 2 years, resigned in April, 3 months after it was sworn in, but continued to act in a caretaker capacity. Kuwait bans political parties but has given its legislature more influence than similar bodies in other Gulf monarchies, including the power to pass and block laws, question ministers, and submit no-confidence motions against senior government officials. Moving on, France's lower house of parliament on Tuesday elected Yael Braun-Pivet of President Emmanuel Macron's centrist alliance as its new speaker. She is the first woman to hold the post. Braun-Pivet election came in Parliament's first session since Macron party lost its majority and prepared to tackle proposals on fighting inflation and protecting abortion rights. Macron's centrist alliance Ensemble still has the most seats in the National Assembly, France's most powerful house of parliament, but no longer enough to comfortably adopt laws. Braun-Pivet is the former socialist who joined Macron party in 2016 and a relative newcomer to lawmaking. She was chosen by secret ballot over candidates from the rival parties. Women remain in the minority in the assembly, and Braun-Pivet's appointment was seen as sending an important message about women in politics. And now hundreds of protesters of President Pedro Castillo from all across Peru marched on Monday to demand the dissolution of Congress. In the past month, Castillo has survived 2 impeachment votes in Congress, and the general attorney is currently investigating him for corruption. Supporters taking part in demonstrations mainly were indigenous farmers and members of self-defense organizations that are largely composed the base that took him to power in 2021. This is a continuation of a political crisis that began in Peru in 2016 and has led to instability as well as 5 presidents and 3 dissolutions of Congress. Polls show Peruvians are greatly unhappy with both Castillo and Congress. Castillo was sworn into office on July 2021 and his administration is scheduled to last for 5 years until July 2026. US President Joe Biden on June 25th signed into law the major federal gun reform in 3 decades, marking a significant bipartisan breakthrough on one of the most contentious policy issues in Washington. The legislation came together in the aftermath of recent mass shootings in Uvalde, Texas, elementary school, and a Buffalo, New York supermarket.
God bless us with the strength to continue to work, to get the work that's left undone, done. And the lives lost that can't be saved, that are obviously gone, but will be an inspiration for us to do more.
Proclaiming that lives will be saved, US President Joe Biden on June 25th signed a bipartisan gun bill, the first of its kind in 3 decades. Designed to keep weapons away from dangerous people. Titled as the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the bill came together just weeks after mass shooting in Texas and in New York that killed more than 30 people, including 19 children at an elementary school. The House on June 24th passed the bill by 234-193, including 14 Republicans voting with Democrats. The Senate passed the bill in the late-night vote on June 22nd. The law includes provisions to help states keep guns out of the hands of those deemed to be a danger to themselves or others. The law enhances background checks on gun buyers 18 to 21 years old. It encourages states to develop better red flag laws that would deny guns to people who are deemed to be dangerous. It adds dating partners to the list of domestic abusers who are prohibited from buying firearms. The bill encourages states to include juvenile records in the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, with grants, as well as implements a new protocol for checking those records. The bill goes after individuals who sell guns as the primary sources of income but have previously evaded registering as federally licensed firearm dealers. It also increases funding for mental health programs and school security. Citing a litany of mass shootings from Las Vegas to Parkland, Florida, Biden said, "People are too long have urged the government to do something about the gun problem." Just before signing the bill, Biden praised the families of gun violence victims with whom he had met. He said their activism in the face of loss was a difference maker.
Especially want to thank the families. And Jill and I, many of whom we sat with for hours on end across the country, so many we've gotten to know who lost their souls to an epidemic of gun violence. They lost their child, their husband, their wife. Nothing is going to fill that void in their hearts. But they led the way, so other families will not have the experience and the pain and trauma that they had to live through.
The reform came the same week as the Supreme Court expanded gun owners' rights, saying for the first time that the US Constitution protected an individual's ability to carry a handgun in public for self-defense. The package represents the most significant new federal legislation to address gun violence since the expired 10-year-old assault weapons ban of 1994, though it fails to ban any weapons and falls far short of what Biden and his party had advocated for. Bureau Report, Sansad TV.
It's time to take a short break here. On the other side, we'll talk about the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill passed by UK government and much more. All this after this short break. You stay tuned to Sansad TV. Welcome back. You're watching Democracies of the World. Moving on, UK government plans to override parts of the Brexit deal relating to Northern Ireland have passed their first hurdle in Parliament. The British Parliament passed the bill on Monday to amend the Northern Ireland Protocol. Theresa May, the former UK Prime Minister, led criticism of the Northern Ireland Protocol bill, condemning it as illegal and warning it that it would damage Britain's standing in the world.
The House of Commons of the British Parliament on June 27 passed the bill proposed by the British government to unilaterally amend part of the Northern Ireland Protocol, which pushed the bill to the next stage of the legislative process. The bill was passed with 295 votes in favour and 221 votes against, but was severely criticised by many Conservative and opposition members, including former Prime Minister Theresa May. Theresa May and other critics believe that the plan to amend the Northern Ireland Protocol is illegal and may trigger a trade war with the EU.
Want to do anything that would diminish this country in the eyes of the world. I have to say to the government, this bill is not, in my view, legal in international law. It will not achieve its aims, and it will diminish the standing of the United Kingdom in the eyes of the world.
There were, however, a number of Tory abstentions, and the measure is expected to face months of delays and amendments when it reaches the House of Lords, the upper house, before becoming a law. If approved, the legislation would remove checks on goods entering Northern Ireland from the rest of the UK, thereby scrapping parts of a trade treaty that Johnson signed before Britain left the EU in 2020. The British government says that the rules, known as the Northern Ireland Protocol, are burdening businesses and undermining peace in Northern Ireland. It argues that the unilateral move is justified under international law because of the genuinely exceptional situation. The EU has threatened to retaliate against the UK if it goes ahead with its plan to rewrite the rules of the post-Brexit deal, raising the spectre of a trade war between the two major economic partners. Johnson said that he believed the plan could become law by the end of the year if Parliament cooperates. The government wants to fast-track the bill through Parliament before lawmakers take their summer break. Northern Ireland is the only part of the UK that shares a border with an EU country, Ireland. When Britain left the European Union and its borderless free trade zone, the two sides agreed to keep the Irish land border free of customs posts and other checks, because an open border is a key pillar of the peace process that ended decades of violence in Northern Ireland. Instead, to protect the EU's single market, there are checks on some goods, such as meat and eggs, entering Northern Ireland from the rest of the UK. Johnson's Conservative government claims overzealous EU implementation means that the rules are not working as expected and are causing a political crisis in Northern Ireland. Bureau Report, Sansad TV.
Moving on, members of the Bulgarian parliament on Wednesday voted for a no-confidence motion against Prime Minister Kirill Petkov. The move potentially sets the stage for a fresh round of elections. However, Petkov's centrist PP party does have a second chance to propose a government to lawmakers. The vote to topple the government, which only came to power 6 months ago, was a narrow one, with 123 delegates voting in favour and 116 against. The vote comes after the ruling coalition lost its majority amid disputes over budget spending and Sofia's blocking of North Macedonia's EU accession. Petkov, a 42-year-old Harvard graduate who has pledged to combat corruption, has taken a strong pro-European and pro-NATO position since Russia invaded Ukraine, an unusual stance for a country with a traditionally friendly attitude towards Moscow. And Bulgaria's parliament voted last week to lift a veto that has long blocked European Union membership negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania. The decision has raised fresh hopes that the bloc can now press on with its expansion plans in the Western Balkans amid Russia's war in Ukraine. The vote to lift the veto passed with 170 in favour, 37 against and 21 abstentions. France, which currently holds the EU's rotating presidency, had made last-ditch efforts this week to resolve an ethnic and cultural dispute between Bulgaria and North Macedonia that was the source of the veto. The Bulgarian government has insisted that North Macedonia formally recognize that its language had Bulgarian roots, acknowledge in its constitution a Bulgarian minority, and quash hate speech against Bulgaria. North Macedonia said that its identity and language weren't open for discussion. And now Sri Lanka's cabinet on Monday approved the draft bill on 22nd amendment to the constitution that will give more power to the parliament than the president. This comment amid protest against President Gotabaya Rajapaksa over his handling of the economic crisis in the country. The crisis has caused a shortage of essential items in the country. The street protests have been triggered across the country over the poor handling of the economic crisis and the lack of accountability to it. Protesters are demanding that the resignation of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. The 20A adopted in 2020 had given unfettered powers to President Rajapaksa after abolishing the 19th Amendment. Andrew Gillum, the 2018 Democratic nominee for Florida governor, is facing 21 federal charges related to a scheme to seek donations and funnel a portion of them back to him through third parties. The announcement was made by the U.S. Attorney's Office on Wednesday. Gillum, 42, is also charged with making false statements to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Gillum met with undercover FBI agents posing as developers while he was mayor and during his campaign for governor. His associates sought donations from the agents and suggested ways to provide money without listing them as political contributions. The agents were asked to contribute $1 lakh to Gillum's campaign. And that's all we have in this edition of our program on Democracies of the World. Connect with us on various social media platforms for all the latest from India and around the world. You can send in your feedback at sansad@sansad.nic.in. Stay tuned for more informative programs on Sansad TV. Till then, goodbye, namaskar.